Hi, I'm Joshua Wood, and this is my recap video. As you can see here, this is my dinosaur working in the UDK standard map, um, and once the pathing's a bit buggy, and I couldn't get the Z axis to align, the workflow research I did was from Z-Spline, and once that suggested taking a high poly and then making it into a low poly and texturing it twice, I still took the core concepts from that. My workflow started off with a low poly instead of the high poly, and once I had the basic outlines of the dinosaur, I then took it into ZBrush, sculpted it, exported out, retopologized it, unwrapped it, took it back into ZBrush, poly painted it, textured it, rigged it, got it into UDK. Next I want to talk about some of the problems I encountered. As you can see, there are some seams around the neck and slightly less noticeably around the tail and the joints, where the shoulders and the thighs meet the body of the dinosaur. This is due to some problems with pelt mapping, as I was unable to pelt map the entire dinosaur as a single pelt map. Also, I had some problems exporting the high poly sculpted mesh out of ZBrush. It wouldn't let me export higher than subdivision 4, which overall affected the quality of the normal map. Whilst I tried to go over this in Photoshop and try and sort of add in some extra details and correct some of the differences, it didn't quite turn out how I wanted. Playing in the background is the walking animation. I tried to go for a sort of a limp effect, but I did have some problems with the bones locking up as it was walking. Whilst I tried to correct this using the hubs, it didn't quite achieve the full effect. Playing in the background is the idle animation. Also shown is the rigging that I used. Now, there are some weird extensions here. For some reason, once I'd exported it out, the bones stretched. Whilst this didn't actually have an effect on the final model in UDK, I just want to iterate that those were not the bones that I designed for the rig. Here is the unwrap that I used for the final model. Now, as you can see, some of the texture space isn't particularly well used. This was due to time constraints. Whilst creating a poly paint as your base texture, I found there would be some black lines between the seams, and so allowed myself a little bit more space so that I could go into Photoshop, use a clone stamp, go around the edges just to make sure that those black seams didn't show up. When I was creating my base mesh, this was the picture that I used as reference to get the vague outline of the shape. This picture I used to get the placement of the bones down when I was rigging my skeleton. When I was looking at sculpting and texturing, I used iguanas as a base for what I was doing with my textures. I used the differing patterns in the scales, trying to keep it bigger around the face. And I added in some spines, but not fully articulated spines. I wanted them to just be more large clumps of scales, as you can see sort of around this area on the picture. I used this as a better reference for a slightly darker model because I didn't want my dinosaur to be very bright. I used the stripes as a basic inspiration, but then I moved to a more mottled pattern once I was poly painting because I wanted it to feel like a proper natural camouflage instead of something that would suit a smaller creature like this better. I didn't have time to seek feedback from the industry, but comparing my work to this picture taken from the game Primal Carnage, you can see that whilst the basic forms are present in my model, this is obviously to a much higher level of detail. The skin folds are more pronounced. I only went for the one fold on my model mistakenly, and I didn't have any skin folds around the head. So you can see that whilst my model would look okay in something like a handheld game, it probably doesn't quite meet today's standards. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Once again, my name is Joshua Woods. Goodbye.